Good afternoon. My name is Gary Morris. I'm a contributor to the Science, Medicine, and Technology Curriculum Committee. And on behalf of that team, we're just happy to invite you to today's session. Please, at this moment, take out your cell phones, double check that they are in silent mode. Mine is, okay. Just to make sure we don't interfere with the presentation. Also, we want to welcome the crowd that is joining us via Zoom today in the Haas virtual classroom. Special thanks to our course technician, Mary Ellen Mayulo, for supporting our hybrid modality. And if any of you have coordinated or lectured, you know that it's a little complicated. Without her, we're dead. Now, if you have questions today and you are attending via Zoom, we will remind you that you should input your questions in the chat. Mary Ellen will receive them, and at an appropriate time, she will ask the questions for you. If you have questions here in the classroom, please raise your hand. Mike has indicated that he would like to get your questions while they're fresh. So if you have a question, raise your hand, but do not ask the question until I run over here with the mic, because until you get the microphone, the people at home can't hear your question. So raise your hand and wait, and we will get to you. As a reminder, next Tuesday, April the 2nd, is our first of 2 monthly programs in April. Next week's program is entitled Defining Good County Governance. Gee, that's not an interesting topic, is it? It is presented by Eric Lufer, President of the Citizens Research Council of Michigan, and Allegan County Commissioner Jim Story. Now, you can join us in person at the Jack Miller Center for Musical Arts, where coffee, cookies, and donuts will be served beginning at 9 a.m. You can also join us virtually via YouTube. Stay tuned to the next HASP happenings for the link. Again, the program begins at 9:30 on Tuesday, April the 2nd. Now, on to today's business. I am happy to introduce to you Professor Mike Jipping. He's professor and department chair of computer science at Hope College. He has taught there since 1987. You can imagine he has seen a few changes in his field during that time. Professor Jipping has a bachelor's degree from Calvin University, but he has a Master of Science and a PhD from the University of Iowa. His current research interests are in network protocols and programming languages, but he has been fascinated by and taken quite an interest in a topic that involves neither networks nor programming languages, namely large language models. In this basketball town, I had to ask him, as a former Hawkeye, are you a Caitlin Clark fan? She's playing tonight at 8. He said, isn't everybody? So you know he's one of us. Please welcome Professor Mike Jipping.
All right, so I'm used to teaching 18 to 22-year-olds, which means first of all, you guys acted like them because you filled the back end first and moved through the front. That's like, that's the way it is. Also, you want to, you're going to act like them. You could read your email on your phones if you want and ignore me. I mean, that's what they do. But they do. But beyond that, if you want to ask questions anytime, feel free. I'm used to that. I'm putting my stool up here because I had my left knee replaced at Christmas, and it's about 95%, but you never know if I'm going to stand for an hour. I might just want to sit for a minute. So anyway, so let's talk about artificial intelligence. Now, there are some. Oh, hold it. Did you introduce myself? You said where I came from. I've been at Hope for 37 years. 2 of my 3 children came through Hope and loved it. My wife is a Calvin grad, but got her 2nd degree at Hope. So we use the tuition waiver to its largest extent. And so I obviously have a lot of warmth in my heart for Hope College. And when we're at a basketball game and it's Calvin versus Hope, I got to root for who pays my paycheck. So that's what I think. All right, let's talk about artificial intelligence. Just a few statistics. Sometimes it's easy to think of the idea that AI is going to go away. It's a trend. And the answer is it's not. It's not. It's could be a trend because everyone's hot on it right now. They call everything artificial intelligence. But the core of artificial intelligence is going to stay here. Just some statistics to show that more than half of Americans regularly interact with some form of artificial intelligence. Okay, 56% plus or minus epsilon. AI is predicted to contribute 21% net increase of GDP. Now that's pretty significant. As of 2023, the artificial intelligence market is somewhere in the 136 to 454 billion range. And that's just in 2023. 20% of medical providers use computers as part of their diagnosis, which means they also use artificial intelligence as part of their diagnosis. Okay. And 25% of companies have adopted AI to address labor shortages, which is also interesting. So we'll talk about some of that. Some recent announcements. It seemed that, and we'll talk about ChatGPT in a sec, but ChatGPT came out in late 2022, and it seems that since ChatGPT came out, it's just flooded with AI everything. And just a couple here. Google's Gemini came out with an artificial intelligence called Gemini. It's on smartphones. It's on my phone, and I didn't even ask for it. The idea is that it's trained on a certain set of data. It's going to help you do things. Okay. I found it interesting that the UK Armed Forces are using AI for military operations. We'll talk about why you should be worried about that. Artificial intelligence is also paired with auto driving. So in Google auto driving cars, they're starting to use artificial intelligence more to react to certain traffic situations, which is a good thing. At Hope College, certainly the introduction of artificial intelligence has affected our teaching, and it has affected how we assign homework and testing. I'll talk about that. Plagiarism, as a good example, plagiarism is so simple now that we have ChatGPT, that we've changed aspects of class management. I certainly have. And we'll talk about how that all has affected that. So let's think about artificial intelligence and what it is and what it isn't. So yeah, I came to Hope in 1987, and at that time, just 4 years prior, not 4 years, I graduated from Calvin in 1981, and I worked in the computer center at Calvin, and we used to run. This is a punch card. We used to run punch cards, and that was in 81. Okay. Now I use them as notes to write notes to myself. They were cleaning up my building a couple of years ago. We was doing house cleaning, and some guy was coming up. He had a cart and he had 10 boxes of punch cards. They were going to go and recycle them. I said, "No, you can't do that." So I took them. I took 4 of them, and now I hand them out in class. And when we talk in class about storage, I say circa 1960 to 1980, this is storage right here. Okay, this is how programs written for computers were stored, and this is how they were entered into a computer. And so students look at me, but I hand those out, and basically I'm handing out a line of programming right here. There you go. All right, let's talk about learning. Now think about how you learn. Right now, there are generally, when I actually Googled this, there are probably 11 to 12 different categories of learners. They generally group, and some of you, I mean, I know Don is, I know Don to some degree. Some of you I recognize that you're teachers, okay? So you know how students learn, you know how you learn, you know how people you know learn, okay? They generally fall into 4 categories, and that's why I have my card with me. They tend to be auditory learners. Now, auditory learners need to hear something spoken to them. So they need to be in a lecture, for example, and have something spoken to them so that they can process it kind of in real time. There are visual learners. Visual learners need images and examples. I'm a visual learner. Okay. I mean, you can tell me all day long about how to program in a new programming language, but until I see a program written in the language, I'm really not going to ingest that. I'm really not going to process that yet. Okay. So when I see a program written in it, I then recall what I heard you say, you described to me, and then I can internalize it. Read-write learners need written material. They need to be able to read it to themselves. And kinesthetic learners need tactile to best process information. They need tactile, they need to feel somehow what you're trying to tell them. So most students I run into these days are visual learners. Many of them are, I call them YouTube learners. Okay, these are kids who grew up with YouTube and learned by watching videos. I had a student last year, who I'm on sabbatical, by the way, this semester. And so I might say this semester, but I'm lying. So catch me on that. The student just came, he was an intro student. I was teaching an intro to computer science. And he came to me right up. He says, can I see this on YouTube? I learned by video. I just said, no. Most of college, 90% of college is not on YouTube, bud. You're going to have to learn how to do something else. Well, yeah, there we go. And so he and I kind of sparred all semester, how can I get that on YouTube? Where can I find that? And I said, here's a book. And you're going to see me a lot because that's your visual. Okay, but it's going to be in this book too. And so that's a hard thing for people to switch into a different mode. Okay, sometimes it's just how they're built. Sometimes it's how they learn, and they learn how to pick up information. Now, I talk about this because it's pertinent to artificial intelligence. What we want to do in artificial intelligence is we want to teach the computer something so that it can innovate. I shouldn't use that word. So it can generate material based on what it learned. Okay, and that's right there. Oh, hey, Herb, you can see in the back. That's the essence of artificial intelligence right there. We have to teach the computer something so that in the end, it will generate new stuff back to me. Okay, hopefully based on the questions that I've asked. Now, you know that if I give you 5 pieces of information and ask you to generate a 6th, it's not going to happen very well, right? Because you only have 5 things to go on. On the other hand, if I have 100,000 pieces of information on the same thing, on hairstyles, and then I ask a question about hairstyles, you have a better base on which to tell me something about hairstyles. Okay, so that's how we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. What would you call the computer as a learner? So let's first think about what computers are good at. First of all, computers are good at numbers. That's all they have. Okay, intro to computer science. It's the first thing we talk about, first day. All a computer can do is memorize numbers. That's it. All a computer can do is process numbers. That's it. You want to talk about an image? We have to figure out how to code that image as a number. Okay. You want to talk about a puppy. We have to figure out how to represent a puppy as an image, as a number. Okay. So we have to talk to computers that way. Computers are good at patterns, sequences of numbers that are memorized and analyzed. Okay. And a computer can determine numbers because a computer has a very good capacity for processing and for figuring out numbers in sequence. Computers are very good at repetition. They can repeat things infinitely. Okay? As long as there's power, they can turn the cycle. And frankly, that's all a computer ever does. It just it executes instructions in a cycle. And then it does it again, and then it does it again, and it does it again. Okay? Computers are also good at saving and restoring. Okay? So to combine these things together, we have the ability of a computer to look at a sequence of information, figure out a pattern from that sequence of information, and then send it back to you. Okay? And in essence, that's artificial intelligence. So we'll see how that works. So let's talk about learners again. How would you tell someone about a concept that they know nothing about? You're going to teach someone something new. For some people, you might want to start with a definition. So if we're going to teach someone about a box, they have no idea what a box is. Right? I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to describe a box to them. Now, the first thing I'm going to do to describe that box is to define a box. Okay, a box is, and I ripped this off from Wikipedia. Okay, even you ask it simple things like box, it can give me a definition. A box is a container. It's used for storing and transportation. Most boxes have flat, parallel, rectangular sides, and boxes can be small, they can be large, they can be made of a variety of materials, they can be closed, they can be shut. But the real bottom line for a box are parallel sides, parallel rectangular prisms, whatever those are. So when you tell someone about a box, and the first thing you do is define a box for them, what can they do with that information? Pretty much nothing. Okay. I can hand them a box and they could probably verify that it's a box. Yep, it's a box. 4 sides, parallel. I can shut it, I can open it. But I can't say to them, give me a box that's 12 by 12 by 12. You haven't told them how. What you've told them is what a box is. And they might be able to pick some random thing, maybe in this room, maybe in their mind, and stumble on the fact that it's a box, and then I hand it to you. Okay? But bottom line is, definitions don't do much for really learning, for most people, for really learning what something actually is. Because I think you're hearing what I'm saying. If I'm going to ask you, if you know what I'm talking about, you should be able to generate something about it. You should be able to give me something about a box once you learn about a box. Okay? And a definition doesn't do it. So, this is what we expect from artificial intelligence. When we talk about artificial intelligence, we don't want AI to verify something. So when I talk to ChatGPT and I'm a student and I want it to write an essay for me, I'm not asking, hey, is this an essay? I'm saying, generate an essay for me on the Civil War from 1850 to, or 1834 to 1850, go. And it will do that because I'm looking for it to generate something, to produce for me something. I went to DALL-E which is ChatGPT's image side. And I said, give me a box of puppies with rainbows. And this is what I got. I got three images that depicted puppies with rainbows. Okay. And I look at those and I think, these guys are pretty cute. How to do that? Okay. But that's what I'm doing with AI. I'm asking it to give me something. Okay. And it generated three images for me. Now, I guess I could, if I really wanted to, although we're not set up to do that, I could draw one of these. And I could hand it to DALL-E. I could say, is this a box of puppies with rainbows? Or I could even say, what is this? I'm not quite sure it could actually identify it. Because it's a generative model. It's the generative artificial intelligence that we're using. So generative artificial intelligence is a class of artificial intelligence algorithms and models that are capable of generating new data, new images, new text, and other content that is similar to, but not exactly the same as, the data it's been trained on. Okay, and that's what we call, normally when people use the phrase artificial intelligence, that's what they mean. All right, so let's talk about how to teach somebody something in a second way to do that. So what I want to do is I want to teach somebody about a box, but now instead of giving them the definition of a box, I'm going to show them a box. I'm going to give them an example, and I'm going to show them 10 boxes. And I think they're going to pick up on the fact that, they all look kind of the same. Okay, they're all, and we'll call them rectangular prisms anymore. They'll call them, well, they got sides, and there's 4 of them, and they hold stuff. Okay. Now, what happens if I give them 1,000 boxes? Now you're more sure of what a box is because you see the pattern in all the boxes. What happens if I give them 500,000 boxes? Okay. Wow. Now they can figure out, they can take a look at a box, right? Now, if I gave you a box, could you verify based on what you've learned on it by example? Yeah, kind of, right? You could find a box that's close to this one, look at them and say, these are 80% similar. So I'm with 80% 80% surety, 80% certainty, I can tell you that box A is a box because box B is a box. What I really want to do now is I want to generate. So by giving you 500,000 boxes, can you generate a box? Well, yeah, you could pick one. If I said to you, I want a box 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches, you could pick one that's close and shrink it to 12 by 12 by 12 and hand it to me. Okay, there you go. Now, if I do it again, okay, give me a box 12 by 12 by 12. Well, now you're going to pick another box out of those 500,000 boxes you've just looked at, and you might have to make it a little bigger and hand it to me. 2 different boxes that you have generated for me. Okay, now, teaching by example is, for me at least, a great way to learn. For the computer, however, it's essential. So let's take our puppies in a box. So if I ask the computer, give me puppies in a box with rainbows. Okay. They're going to look at this and the computer's going to say, okay, I'm going to take a puppy from a database, just like we talked about. I'm going to go in my pile of puppy pictures, and I'm going to pull one. Okay. Now I'm going to take is that a puppy in a box? No. All right. I got another one. Puppy in a box. I got 700,000 images. I'll pull a puppy in a box. I'm going to pull a rainbow. Got a rainbow. I'm going to put them together now. Okay, which isn't artificial intelligence. Yeah, putting them together is just an algorithm, just a program. Computers do that all the time. And I'm going to put some kind of random background in there. So I'm going to pull something from the database. I'm going to put the puppies in the box. I'm going to take a rainbow and somehow plaster it on the picture. And I'm going to put a background down there. Now, is that intelligence? What do you think? Tell me if that's intelligence. No, that's not intelligence. That's pattern matching. That's image manipulation. Okay? That's, to be frank with you, that's guesswork. Okay? And yeah, you come up with that. And I asked for puppies in a box with rainbows, and that's what it gave me. That's pretty close. But it's not intelligent. Right? Now, here's an example of why. So I asked for puppies in a box with rainbows. We take puppies from the database. Yes. We take something, show something like those puppies. Yes. I'm going to take the puppies and take a rainbow from the database and show that right here. Okay. And I got to use the mouse here. All right. So let's take a look here. Okay. And I think I can blow this up. Let me see if I can do that. There we go. All right. Are those puppies? No. I would say those are mutants. Okay. What did the artificial intelligence do? It picked a set of puppies from the database. It fiddled with the picture to make it look a smidgen different. And it gave me that picture. There it is. Now this puppy here, I'm sorry, I should point at it with the mouse here. This puppy here is growing something out of its head. Okay. And this one is got a paw there, but I don't know what this thing is. It looks like a flipper. And so we got some trouble here. Now, number two, tell me what else is wrong with this picture. Boom. Yes, it has the curve correct, but the colors are all wrong. Someone didn't tell the computer. In fact, here's where definitions come in. Someone didn't tell the computer what defines a rainbow. The computer said, I think a rainbow is a curve with a bunch of lines and a bunch of colors. Boom, there we go. And that's not a rainbow. The colors are all wrong. So artificial, let's see if I can get this back to normal. Come on, there we go. Okay. Yep, there we are. So it's just a box of puppies with a rainbow. It's a bunch of puppy mutants with some kind of curve, some kind of rainbow-like thing. Okay, not a puppy with a rainbow, not a set of puppies with a rainbow. That makes sense? Yeah. And based on what I told you about how a computer puts together that image, that makes sense, right? It's going to pick something it knows. It's going to do a little variation on what it knows, and it's going to hand it back to me. Okay. So this is generative AI. Computers strive to learn the underlying patterns and structures of the training data. The patterns and structures are built into a system that is enabled for recall. Then the knowledge is used to generate new and original content that hasn't been seen by others. No one has seen those mutant puppies before. Okay. And that is what generative AI is. And to be honest, that's the definition of generative AI. That's what the algorithms do. Okay. They select, they slightly manage, and they represent back to the person who's asking the question. Let's consider ChatGPT. That's one of the most famous AIs right now. The generative AI program, it generates dialogue. ChatGPT is meant to generate basically a conversation. Okay, it wants to hear you ask for something, and then it wants to give you text back. Okay, the first version was built in 2018. Was released in 2018. the popular version of it was released in 2022. In 2022, how I learned it was I went to class. We were going to tell, it was an intro class to computer science, and one of the students says, "Hey, have you heard about ChatGPT?" I said, "No, why don't you show it to us?" So he gets in the front, and they had just turned in an assignment that involved writing. In my classes, every week they have to find an article and summarize the article and then react to the article. And I give them a topic. And he says, "Hey, I can show this to you." And he gets in the front and he shows us his what he handed in. "I did this with ChatGPT." And I looked at him and I said, "You realize you just plagiarized?" "No, this is with ChatGPT." Since then, I've had prospective students come to me and say, "Is it okay if I write all my programs with ChatGPT? Is it okay if I, do a lot of my writing assignments with ChatGPT?" They want to know if a college will recognize that. And the answer is no. That's plagiarizing. We'll talk about how that goes. ChatGPT learned by training on about 300 billion words, 570 gigabytes of textual data. That's a lot. Okay. From lots of sources, one of which, sorry, hang on here. I'm speaking to the choir, but when you get to be my age, lots of things have to hang off my ear. So there we go. ChatGPT was fine-tuned by making it talk to itself. Okay, so you gave it a prompt, ChatGPT would present something and ChatGPT would evaluate it. Okay, and so it slowly, as it did this for days and months, and it fine-tuned itself to basically on how to speak and how to converse with humans. All right. And now, as I said, ChatGPT is probably one of the most popular sources that people have for interfacing with artificial intelligence. So at this point, give me some questions. What I'm saying making sense? Go. Oh yes, you need the mic.
You mentioned that it was providing new information, so I may have the answer, but say two people gave the same prompts to Dolly for an image. If they gave the exact same prompts, is there any possibility of them getting the same image?
When you say any possibility, sure.
Oh, okay.
Is the possibility, what's the probability of that happening? I don't know exactly, but it's very possible they'll get different.
So then how would someone know if it was created through Dolly?
So by looking at an image, they would, if this was created by an artificial intelligence or not,
Right.
you would not know. Am
So
I going to know if somebody if that guy handed in his read something, write something assignment?
Right.
And I didn't. I looked at it already, and I hadn't known that it was done by ChatGPT.
So my son is a graphic designer, and
Mhm.
I'm just saying that's going to change the world of graphic design, right?
The first time ChatGPT came out in late 2022, the weekend after the release date, someone sat down and with ChatGPT on a Saturday, fed ChatGPT a bunch of prompts. ChatGPT wrote a children's book, went to DALL-E to get the illustrations, and published it through Amazon.
Wow.
And no one could tell the difference. Now, I shouldn't say that. It's not right. People could tell the difference at that, especially at that time. The mutant factor was a big one in terms of the images. Go.
I think you said 300 billion words. Were those all English words or?
Excellent question. We'll talk about that in a little while. Bias is built into this system. Okay. Is it all English? Is it all English, Western, white male based? Or how do we differentiate anything to ChatGPT? The answer to that is the majority of it was English. The companies that do conversational AI now employ people in all, basically all the countries in the world to read, to take something and read it aloud. So folks like ChatGPT understand it and can generate in another language. But the original data was about 75% English. Go.
What are you using for your definition of intelligence?
I'm not going to answer that because I don't think we've hit that yet. This is not intelligence. And we're going to go on to talk about more about why this is not intelligence, but it's pattern matching. It's random mutation. I don't call that intelligence. I call that a great algorithm, but that's just an algorithm. Okay, so at what point does it become intelligence? At what point can it talk to itself intelligently? I'm not quite sure.
Just an anecdote and possibly some humor. I was watching a TV program that talked about Babel and learn a foreign language. Won't this be great? So out of curiosity, I went to the website, looked at the X number of things they had, and one of them listed was English. And one of them clarified British or American English. And I just started laughing. You mean with John F. Kennedy's accent? Do you mean with an Alabama accent? Do you mean with a slang California accent or a
There you go.
Chicago accent?
There you go.
And so that's hilarious. So if someone from a foreign country comes here, they're not going to be able to talk to people if they're from the north and they're going to the south, and that's what it sounds like.
Everything
Vice
is a
versa.
different language, right? Yeah, it makes that's pretty interesting.
Along that same line, I'm taking a duolingual language right now, and I'm at the point where like I'm trying to respond in the language I'm taking, and they don't accept my English. So that's really funny. Like I'll put my, one of the words in a different word order and they're correcting me or just say, do it again. So, but I am contributing to chatbot, clearly.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'd like your opinion on
Uh-oh. Go.
So pattern seeking, understanding patterns. How does that generate, and I'm using that term just very generally, context? What at this point in the development of artificial intelligence and large language models, and the follow-on question is, how good is that context, and does the ChatGPT really understand what it's talking about?
Context is difficult, especially if it is not stated. So if I talk about, say, if I talk about writing a book in an academic environment, okay, and I don't say it's an academic environment, but like ChatGPT knows I'm coming from hope.edu. That's really hard. Okay. If it's stated in the prompt, context is easier because now I can say, I want a box of puppies, St. Bernard puppies, so I can describe that, and from its knowledge base, it can use the words that I've had said in the prompt. It can't derive them. I mean, it could at some point. I could probably, if I used them 3 prompts back and I said something about being in an academic environment, it could use that. But that's not intelligence. That's simply recording it in a different way so that I can look it up as I'm answering the question. Go.
I have a 2-part question. Number 1 is, do you think that in the future, if not now, artificial intelligence for language learning will be able to understand idioms? Because if we go to their country, they come to our country, it makes no sense. So that's part A. And then part B is my daughter had a knee replacement a number of years ago and she was bored. And so I heard her talking to somebody. I didn't hear anyone come to the house. I went in and she's talking to her smartphone, asking it for jokes. And so she's going through all this list of jokes that the computer's telling her in her smartphone. And eventually she said something and the computer wasn't getting her at all. And so she said, "Are you an idiot?" Because she had tried several times. And the computer
I was frustrated.
The computer came back and said, "That's not very nice, Kimberly." addressed her by name. So do you think in the future, certainly in that context, it could understand that "are you an idiot" is not a nice thing to say, but do you think in the future, computers will be able to understand emotion or inference? Because that's a huge part of communication.
We'll mention that during, I mean, by just by a sentence. The question that at the present time, emotion becomes part of the prompt that you ask. I mean, and emotion, I mean, a computer can detect that to some degree if I'm yelling or if I'm, it can analyze my facial features. And again, it becomes a part of the context that we talk about. It's part of the environment around the question that perhaps the computer can reference as it's answering the question. It becomes a data point. Can it react to that emotion by itself? Not yet, and I don't see it doing that in the near future. Emotion and idiom is simply a data point. It's simply it's if I can use a contraction versus, I cannot versus I can't, that's part of the language database. That's part of the training data. And the computer can pick that up. So idiom, sure, the computer will pick it up because it's part of the training data. It doesn't pick it up. It doesn't generate it in a sense. It doesn't pick it up as a new idiom or it doesn't compute it. It learns it. It memorizes. All right, let's see, done, and then two more and we'll be ready to roll. Oh, I'm sorry, three. Well, let's say three. Go. Just saying that.
In context to plagiarism, if ChatGPT is generating a response, how is that plagiarism?
In my class,
Oh.
Plagiarism is anything you claim as yours that isn't. So ChatGPT, I claim the computer wrote it, but I claim I did it. Plagiarism. I talked to my roommate and they gave me their paper. I didn't copy it. I just read it. And then there's a couple snippets in. No, that's plagiarism. I went to the internet and found some code and I used it here, but the rest of this code is mine. No, it's not all yours. It's plagiarism. Anything that you learn, you can learn from it. I'm not saying that. But if you use it and claim it as your own, then you're lying when you hand it in. Of course we do. But I'm asking you, okay, let's say if someone asked you to say, make for me a beautiful lasagna. Okay. All your own, your recipe. And you turned around and you looked up the recipe for that tomato sauce. It's not your recipe. And the person that asked you has the right to claim that. Now, do we all do that? Of course we do. I don't think I made a recipe in the last 10 years that wasn't on the internet. And I do cook for my family. But I think that it's in the form of asking. In education, I need it to be yours. So I know if you've learned something. And if I grade it and it's a C and you want a B, I'll talk to you and we'll work it out. On the other hand, if you hand in something, even a portion of which came from ChatGPT, I can't tell if you're learning something, if you're not learning something, So that's why I'm asking. That's why it's in the form of the ask, because and perhaps the context. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Don. My wife tells me I labor too long with answers, so thank you. Go.
I like your slideshow so far. Did you make it or did ChatGPT? And how would we tell the difference?
Okay, so I made it, right? I was really tempted to make parts of it come from ChatGPT, but I didn't. It's all my own. Now, how could you tell? You couldn't. I've had people make presentations and they said, "Oh, this part was ChatGPT," and you can look at that. You can look at the previous slide. I can't tell the difference. And probably, if I did, it could have been easily better. Never know. One more.
I have a question relative to input. who's inputting all this information? And is it the correct information, or could it be used to create something that is not true?
Okay. I'll answer the who.
Okay.
And then the other part, hold it and ask it at the end. Okay. The who is ChatGPT is put together by a company called OpenAI. They're actually owned by Microsoft. And they did it. They're the people that feeds the algorithm, that builds the database, that builds the software that can feed the ChatGPT or feed the artificial intelligence so it can recognize all the patterns. Humans are doing it. But it's OpenAI that did the harvesting and the curating of that information. To help the companies that want the money are doing that. Could easily be garbage in, garbage out. Exactly. Exactly. Hang on to that. All right, hallucinations. Let's talk about hallucinations. We looked at this. We looked at this picture. We looked at the puppy picture, and we looked at the mutant puppies. Generative AI programs make mistakes, and those mistakes are known as hallucinations, giving some kind of anthropomorphic quality to the AI. There's an example. The example is that it's just not a box of puppies, and it is not a rainbow. Okay, but hey, it could be. They squinted, maybe, but it's known as this happens a lot. It's known as hallucinations. Examples: I give test questions that show answers from the ChatGPT. When I write a test, I say, okay, I asked ChatGPT this, and this is the answer it gave me. Is that correct? Okay. Most often it's not. The students know that. He wouldn't give us a correct answer. But then I say, show it, prove it, prove your response. And yeah, most of the time it's wrong. This is a diagram a professor Professor asked for a diagram that actually explained a concept. This is what he got. And the labels are not even English. Okay, the prompt was in English, but the response, the picture generated for class is irrelevant, and the language used is no language that you can figure out. Okay. It's not even a language, technically. I mean, I don't think so. So anyway, the point is there's some words in there you can figure out. I see pence or fence. There's a couple of things that might work, but the point is these are common. These are hallucinations that are generated by the data. Now, the limitations are that AI is only as good, generative AI is only as good as the language, or the data that it's trained on. Okay? ChatGPT trained on, 300 billion words. All right, that's great. So there's questions of bias. What about those words? There's questions of, is it education? Is it an academic? Is it these colloquialisms? As an anecdote, Microsoft wanted to have an artificial intelligent piece of software that could involve people in colloquial English. Okay, they wanted the AI to learn colloquialisms, and to do that, AI felt that what it should do is stock it with some good conversational English and release it and let it learn in real time. It took it down in 24 hours because the colloquial English that it learned was full of racial slurs, sexual slurs, bias, and people knew that. And so they consciously slanted what they did when they talked to, it was called Tay.ai. When they talked AI, when they talked to Tay, they consciously talked in swear words. Okay? And so that's what the artificial intelligence learned. Okay, and Microsoft learned a valuable lesson. You don't do this in real time. You do this with curated data. And so, but it's interesting. Those are the limitations that we come up with artificial intelligence. So think about this. How do we teach complex things? Multifaceted subjects. Can I teach an artificial intelligent piece of software to tell me about the weather? Okay. Think about that. Can it look in its data and generate ideas about the weather? Suddenly the weather is this thing that it sees outside, or this thing that looks at data to interpret. Okay? It's not in its repertoire. It has to do real-time creative interpretation. Can it do that? Not at present. Okay? Describe what's going on outside for me. What is outside? I don't know. I mean, it looks at, what in this is in my database, what I have to learn. Can it talk about posture? Well, yeah, kind of. We have a research project right now in our department that's describing posture. What happens is when you describe something that's complicated, you have to distill it down to things that AI can react to. Right? So we use posture. This particular one is done by Fola Bemi in our department and Brooke Odell in the engineering department. They take pictures of nurses and analyze their posture. And they feed that to artificial intelligence so that the artificial intelligence can take a picture, analyze the posture, and give the nurses feedback. And it's possible because we have distilled posture down to a couple of different images and reactions to those images. Okay. Health in general. No, you can't do that. I'm intrigued with using artificial intelligence to analyze things like X-rays. Okay, that's just image analysis. I had cancer 5 years ago, and I have all the pictures. I'm a data guy, and anytime they took a picture of something, I asked them if I could have it. Okay, and I look at this and I think, what in this picture could a computer analyze for me and come up with a diagnosis? Okay. I look at the picture and I think, gee, I can't figure out what's a kidney. That's the kind of cancer I had. Kidney and what's not, But anyway, image analysis is difficult. Okay. It's not request and generate. That's what AI is right now. And the English language is particularly difficult. So a mixture of example and definition, and a mixture of generation and verification. These are difficult for AI to do. Okay. A couple of brief structural things. So I keep wandering around, don't I? That's what I do in class. A neural network. Now, a neural network is the original artificial intelligence. Back in the day, neural networks were built as networks of computers that emulated neurons in the brain. Neurons speak with each other. They pass chemicals back and forth. The idea of a neural network is cheap little computers that talk to each other, can share data, can refine data. Okay, and so neural networks now, as it stands these days, neural networks are still at the heart of most artificial intelligence implementations. It emulates learning. It creates an adaptive system that picks up on errors and can refine data. To describe language to a computer, you let it consume statements and compute probabilities. And this probability thing is at the heart of what we're talking about with generative AI. So an idea that we might have is feed the data that describes something. The computer will see the patterns. And then we're going to generate the answer by predicting the words. So let's briefly look at how a computer might generate an answer. So we're going to start off by feeding a program lots of language data. And as we talked about, ChatGPT had a whole lot of language data. But then we ask a question. Okay, the large language model, and now you know why it's large language, because there's lots of pieces, lots of language to that, will generate an answer by relying on its data and using probabilities. So let's say, who was the first president of the United States? So the computer will look at data that represent, that it has, and it says, well, I'm going to generate a one-word answer and start with the. 94% of the data that I have begins with the. I'm making some of these numbers up. Okay. Step 2 says, based on the, I have to define something that reacts to the prompt I have. So the first 93% of statements that began with the word the now begin with the word first. Okay. Now you see where I'm going with this. It follows the path to the answer through discovering answers with probabilities based on what it already has. So the sentence gets longer. We continue the prediction. The first president can predict the first president of the United States because 53% of the data that it has of the United States after it. And then, of course, given that, the first president of the United States, 94% say George Washington. The point I'm making is that probabilities make up this. Okay. And when it gets the final data, it has to perturb it to some degree to make you think that you're getting an original answer. Right? So it might take that and say, George Washington is the first president of the United States. Okay. The subject, it takes subject and noun and verb and screws them all up. Okay. It knows how to do that. So this way of using probabilities to find a path to the answer is the heart of generative AI. It creates new data by aligning it with its training data. And then it adds variation so that it comes to you and it sounds like it's an original answer. Now, because of this, and because of what we just talked about, just a couple of concepts ago, prompting is very, very important. Okay. Giving it a prompt, the generated data takes over for the prompt as predicting moves forward, but you have to start the process. So the way you ask the question is extremely important. Okay, so as an example, I went to ChatGPT and I said, describe rain. Rain is nature's orchestra, a symphony of droplets cascading from the heavens, painting the world with a serene melody. Holy cow. Does that tell me anything about rain? No. Okay. But I didn't give it a whole lot to go on. I used the word describe. I didn't use the word define. Okay. And so, let's see. It's a whisper of clouds. They're tears descending from, oh gosh. Anyway. So the next prompt, I said, define what rain is. Hoping it would get screwed up by my weird use of English. It didn't. Rain is a natural meteorological phenomenon where water vapor condenses in the atmosphere and falls to the Earth's surface in the form of droplets. Boom. Given the right prompt, it gave me the right answer. Now, if you're a student, how do you know you're giving it the right prompt? Okay. How does Hope College's education process need to change to make sure in the age of artificial intelligence, you're generating the correct answer? Okay. Keep in mind two things: prompt engineering and data verification. We'll talk about those in a sec. All right. So some variations on large language models. Generative adversarial networks, GANs, consist of two components. This is where ChatGPT talked to itself. Okay. The generator generates synthetic data, and there's a discriminator that judges the data, evaluates it, and asks for authenticity and that generated data compared to real data, and it decides if it's real or fake. It's an adversarial process. You give me stuff, I'm going to really scrutinize it because I think you're wrong. I'm going to assume you're wrong, and I'm going to prove it. Okay, and there's again, ChatGPT talking to itself is a simple version of this. Often what happens in a GAN is that a computer is specifically designed to judge the prompts or the answers that come out, and is very critical. Variational autoencoders are neural networks that encode and decode data. Instead of simply storing data, they compress it. Okay, this is what happens with, this is valuable in image and audio synthesis. So when I store, if I'm going to store an image, I'm going to store a lot of images. That's a really large amount of data. Okay, so if I'm going to in real time compress and decompress that, I've got to have some computers dedicated to that. And so that's what these guys are. These are GANs working with was the last one, VANs, VAEs. Here's a Martian looking for humans. Okay. The other one I typed in sleepy comic student waiting for class to end. That's what I got. Again, I think these are interesting based on what the computer has in its database. So let's talk about limitations then. You know what I'm going to say now. We've talked about the limitations a lot. Okay. Generative AI generates. It does not create. It is incapable of original content. Now, you might say that, well, isn't data that is randomly perturbed different, and it's different from all the data that the computer has seen? Isn't that original? Fine, call it original. I'm still going to say that it didn't create it. It generated it and then perturbed it. Okay. So if I ask the computer to draw me something, all right, I guess we could do that. Paint me a landscape. Don't generate the landscape. Paint it for me. Not going to do that. But AI can be useful. Okay, where it's useful. And this is where how to teach students at Hope College to use the tools of a computer come into play. All right, so where is AI useful? Situations where the base of information and something can be generated. There is a base of information and something can be generated from it. Okay? A first draft. Okay? A computer could generate a first draft, and you could hone your drafting skills, your editing skills. Go. Oh, Gary, we need a microphone.
Quick question. If I'm generating a first draft using AI, if I ask AI to tell me all of its sources, what am I going to get?
So I've done this. I've asked AI to write me a paper on a particular subject in computer science. And it did. It wrote me a 4-page paper with references, with citations, all of which were fake. Okay. And every single one looked good, had an author, had a title, had a reference where they got it from, pages where they got the paper from. Completely fake, all of them. Okay. Can it tell me the sources? Probably not, because it's going on it's going on the database of patterns and generating it from those patterns. That's the source. It doesn't understand the idea of a bibliography versus just a bunch of text, in a sense. First drafts, note though, in the back of your minds, that no longer are we asking students to write here. We're giving students the editing skill. Okay. If I'm telling a student to edit what ChatGPT has written, that's not writing, in a sense. That's not true writing something from scratch. That is editing from what somebody else did. It's similar, but different. Okay. First drafts, code suggestions. I use that. I'll show you in a second. GitHub Copilot. I have an editor I write my programs in, and as I'm writing my code, the editor will make suggestions. Based on your previous code, I'll bet you want this. 70% of the time, it's correct. And I say, all right, hit the tab key, accept it. Okay. But notice I evaluated it. Right? And again, different skill. Okay. Answers and definitions. I need to know what something is as I'm reading my book. I need to know what it is. I can ask ChatGPT and it can tell me. Images and styles. Here, this is a Disney style fish lying on a plate. Okay. I can ask for the style and I can ask for 10 of them so I can learn what that style is. And since I'm acting like an artificial intelligence, but I'm learning from, learning from these things. This is GitHub Copilot. It's hard to see, and I apologize for that. It's the way I use a dark editor, and it's got a black background and easier on my eyes. But anyway, what happens is I type the word if, and it gave me the rest of that code. Okay. And what was interesting about it is it wasn't just generic code. It was code that it learned I wrote from my previous set of code that I've written above. So I wrote a whole bunch of code above, and now it looks and it phrased the code it suggested in the way that it actually used my style of writing because it learned from what I did. And like I said, 70% of the time, 65% of the time, it's I won't say it's right on, but it's really close. And today I was writing some code and it was tedious, and all of a sudden GitHub Copilot kicked in. I just hit the tab key. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's called a pair programmer. I call it an assistant, but whatever. Here's the automation pyramid. This is what I am starting to tell students. Students are saying to me, well, if in the face of artificial intelligence, what skills do I need? In this, if it's memory, if it's mimicry, if it's pattern matching, if it's problem solving, some of problem solving can be done by artificial intelligence. Patterns that it has seen. But now at this line right here called the AI, a lot of places call it the AI barrier. It now begins to be a human skill. Now, a lot of complex problem solving is done by humans. Discovery, how do you figure that? How do you find the answer? Well, you got to write some code to figure out the answer to that question. Ingenuity, creativity, those are all things that hopefully at Hope College, we're teaching our students. Okay. Yeah, they're getting pattern matching, they're getting memorization, they're getting mimicry, but computer can do that. Where AI is not useful, and again, this is what we've talked about. It can't create anything. It can automate, it can generate, it can perturb the answer so it looks original, but it doesn't do anything creative. Emotional awareness, it can't find the emotion in a sentence beyond what you could discern from the use of perhaps of a certain set of words. I'm using angry words rather than happy words. They can figure that out. Okay. But I'm using an angry word because I'm lonely and because I'm acting out. Well, I can't figure any of that out. Understanding the computer, as I said, AI generates, it does not independently understand, and ethical reasoning. Okay. These are all things that require analysis, not generation, okay, and perturbation. Okay. Ethical reasoning, especially, it can't. Well, let's look at the next one. Okay. This is where AI is dangerous. Okay. Number one, bias. Since AI is generative, bias in the training data is not detected or flagged. It is assumed that it's accurate. Okay. It's perpetuated by social context. There's a movie that we show to our students called Coded Bias that where an artificial intelligence is trained on by well-meaning scientists to do facial recognition. And it doesn't recognize the faces of African Americans. Okay, because it wasn't trained on any, because there was no African American faces in the data. Okay. It's that bias that gets perpetuated when all you have to do is simply add more faces to the data. Okay, and that's a danger. Social manipulation. AI can generate new images from old ones. We call those deep fakes. And you've seen deep fakes already in the election process that we've had. Okay? The idea that I can put Joe Biden's head on Donald Trump's body and make it look pretty close to real. Okay? Because I can get access data that can let me generate that. And of course, data privacy concerns and all of this are very valid. The actor strike that happened over the summer, right into the fall, was part of the actor strike was about artificial intelligence. The idea that I could take Sandra Bullock's image and start to manipulate it so I can make her say whatever I want, because I can use that in an artificial intelligence program. And so there was a bit of that in some of the issues involved in the strike. Sam Altman is the CEO. I said ex-CEO, and then I thought, oh, that's not true, because he was fired and then he was hired back. Okay. Anyway, Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI, and he said this: "I'm particularly worried that these models could be used for large-scale disinformation. Now that they're getting better at writing, they could be used for offensive cyber attacks." Okay, so, in part, what I've been reading about cyber attacks in communication is this: when you have an algorithm or a computer system that does not analyze what it's doing, it doesn't ethically make a choice, it simply does. It simply uses things like, probabilities and how close am I to the real thing? And did the person who wanted this respond? He asked me this prompt, did he respond in a positive way? There's no ethics involved, then you're simply going to try to get the best result. And sometimes the best result is the harm of others. And there's no ethical boundary to that. And that's a big issue with artificial intelligence. Now, AI and hopes classes. Any instance where students can use plagiarism is right for AI. So I told you I'm on sabbatical this semester. Last semester, I taught several courses in the normal Jipping way, which is what I normally do is I give them a lot of tests. They test every 1.5 to 2 weeks. And some of them are online. They can it's a quiz and they can take it online and they can do it in their dorm room. And sometimes it's on paper in class. I couldn't do it anymore. Okay. Someone takes my test, and what I did is I took one of my tests and I fed it to ChatGPT and it got an 80%. And yeah, go ahead, Gary. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we have a question online. You've talked a lot about what it can't do, what it doesn't do well, kind of the problems. But why is everyone so excited about it, and what can it do? How can it be helpful?
So, first of all, it's new, and everybody likes new stuff. Okay. Now, okay, where it's useful is starting places. I think personally, for me, I've written 6 books, okay? Some of which with Herb Dersham back there. I find writing very enjoyable, but sometimes it is just so difficult to get started. Okay, if I had to take a piece of text that I've written and go over it, I can make it sing and dance, but it's that first draft that just always gets me. There we go. Why can't I use ChatGPT for that? Okay. What about that coding piece that I'm just not thinking about it right now? Oh, look, ChatGPT put this in there. Does that make sense? Sure. I think the usefulness of AI comes in suggestions, comes in in part, I'm talking from an academic perspective, of course. from that first step that we take. Now, given that, we have to teach something different. Okay? It can be used as a tool. It can be used for first drafts. It can be used for homework assignments. It can be used for test questions. Okay? But we have to teach students two things. And this is, I mean, I'm going to start doing that more come in the fall when I start teaching again. Okay? Number one, we have to teach what I mentioned before, prompt engineering. How do I ask a question correctly so I get a good answer? And number two, a student has to be, and you have to be, aware that the answer is going to be, could easily be false. And you have to be able to analyze that answer for its correctness. So when I teach a student about code and I say, fine, go to ChatGPT, get that code, I have to teach the student about software verification. How does the student know that that code is correct? Okay, and I have to teach that student techniques to do that. So what I'm teaching, I'm really not teaching the students in that sense. I'm not teaching the students how to write correct code anymore. I'm telling the student how to verify code, okay, that the student already has. So there is a different perspective that we can do. There are other things that ChatGPT does very well. It has a vast array, and all the other AIs, by the way. So I like to generate images for slides once in a while that I throw in class, and I go to DALL-E and I say, hey, give me an image that is represents an array in a language, programming language, and see what it gets. Yeah, sometimes it's funny, sometimes hey, that's kind of cool. These are all things that I perhaps don't have a skill for. If I tell everyone that I can code a web page technically to blow your hair back if I had hair, but it would look awful because I have no artistic sense. Okay. And in that sense, I hope, ChatGPT might even better me in that regard. It might have some artistic sense. I might be able to put some images on it that actually make me look good. So there are a lot of good uses for it. I am very, very concerned about folks that will take ChatGPT's results and simply use them and will not be critical, will not analyze the results. So if you take anything away from this, okay, take away that prompt engineering is important and verification is extremely important. And I think that's it. So yeah, go ahead. Question.
So quickly going back to your last comments about prompt engineering
Yep.
and verification of the software.
Yep.
As you were describing what you're trying or going to try to teach the students to do in terms of, I'll just kind of make it a real high level statement about critical thinking, as well as knowing how the world works. Okay, to me, those are classic elements of a high-end liberal arts education.
Oh, absolutely.
So why wouldn't we do that? And why wouldn't we concentrate on that even more, perhaps, and this is an opinion, I guess, than the skill, right? They're even more important than the actual computer skills they might be getting. So just an opportunity for comment.
I mean, yeah, it's an opportunity for me to say, Hope College does a great job at that. I think you're right on. Critical thinking is at the heart of what the kind of education we want to give students. The context changes all the time. This is it's an example of that change. But at the same time, I want a student that can actually analyze and be critical of what I'm handing them. So to do that, computer science, and from a computer science perspective, to do that, you've got to know a whole bunch of practical things so that you can make a critical choice. Okay. Is ChatGPT helping in that regard? Absolutely. Okay. I hope that that's how students come away from my classes with that. I'm going to give them, they're going to see ChatGPT results. They're going to see their buddies' results. They're going to see their coworkers' results, and they're going to be able to look at those in the same way and analyze. So yes, it's a really great skill.
I remember reading maybe as much as 2 years ago that there was software that a person like yourself could use to check a term paper, for example, and see if it was probably generated by artificial intelligence. Does that exist, and is that true?
It is true. It does exist. It's not, the problem is that as those pieces of software evolve, so does ChatGPT. Okay, I'm looking at you. You mean you just gave me a tool to figure out if I'm incorrect or not? Well, I'm going to be correct next time. Okay, so yes, that's an issue, and for a short time, some of those pieces of software are very useful. However, the next iteration of ChatGPT, and I think it's in its 4th version now, or it's in version 4. It says that those particular things are taken into account, and you can no longer figure them out because it has accounted for it. So,
back in my days of nerdish programming with cards, we had to be concerned about efficiency. Is ChatGPT generating efficient code?
I will say this, that ChatGPT learns in the code that I have worked with, GitHub Copilot. If I have written efficient code, then it writes efficient code. If I write non-efficient code, then it's going to mimic me, in addition to mimicking its database. So I would say for the most part, it is learning. I mean, well, I shouldn't say that. It learns from what it's been given. And I can't evaluate whether or not that's efficient. My guess would be it's handed efficient and non-efficient code. So it tries to do a good job, and that's my job then to figure out whether it's good or bad.
In a recent HAS class on movies, the underlying concept was transitions, kids, adolescents, adults, older age, recognizing that at each step it's new to that human as they, for the first time, realizing what it is. And I couldn't help but think on this AI class that I'm a product, as are many of the people in this room, 40s or 50s, where you trust your parents, you trust the schools, you trust the context, you trust that when you go into the other kid's parents' home and you screw up, you're going to get spanked just like you would at your house, kind of thing. There was a certain level of trust. And I entered the military, and I found out during those times that other people grew up quite differently than what you valued and were taught. And toward the end of that experience, I had a general who said, trust but verify. He didn't mean trust. He didn't trust him for a nanosecond. He probably could throw a refrigerator. He said that to sound nice. What he meant was verify they did what they're supposed to do. And so the inspector showed up, they're good to go. The thing I'm realizing that we all might have to transition our thinking is less than what he talked about, trust and verify, but maybe it's verify and then conclude, because what you're giving, deep fakes and other things, we have to start analyzing. So I don't know where trust fits in anymore contextually to our social environs that's graphically different where you go.
Which, from my perspective, can be very fatiguing. If I have to analyze every bit of data that comes my way, if I can't trust Time Magazine when they publish something, and then the next week they said, oh, gee, this was actually generated by blah, blah, blah. Who can I trust? And how do I interact with my environment now? Do I not trust everything? Do I assume everything's bad and then try to prove they're good? Yeah, very good point.
Speaking of trust, your second bullet point there of using AI as a tool, homework assignments to verify answers, and then the third bullet point, test questions. Where's that? Elaborate further, and how do you avoid the cheating issue there?
Well, the second draft, the second point there, what I've done is I've given out homework questions to students and said, here's a question, get ChatGPT's answer and tell me if it's right. Okay. And so you say to them, so then what I'm grading is their analysis of the AI. The same with a test question. I will often give a test question. I mean, now that ChatGPT is around, I find it interesting to see, here, give ChatGPT's answer to convert this to this and tell me if it's right. Okay. And I say in the test question, I asked ChatGPT, it said this was the same as this. Is it correct or not? That's a test question. Most often it isn't. And especially if it's a technical thing that students have to learn a lot of skill for, ChatGPT can't do that. So most often they can just make the assumption it's wrong and then they go ahead and fix it. Right, Don?
So until now, I've been resisting and downloading an AI program and getting involved in the hype. But if you persuaded me to give it a try when I go home this afternoon, where should I go? What AI program do you recommend? And
Good question.
what trouble will I have trying to get it to run on my computer?
So, and I apologize, I should have brought this along. There's a program that you can run, that you can put on your desktop that allows you to make choices about the models that are used to generate the data. So you can go from, it has several different sources. So ChatGPT 3.5, ChatGPT 4.0. And you can then see the difference between them. 4.0, for example, is much more conversational than 3.5. And it's interesting just to look at those. You could probably put something in software, generate multiple large language, or to generate from multiple large language models. And it's I could draw the icon, but I can't think of the name right now. It's a really great piece of software, and it's just interesting to look at it. When I actually use ChatGPT, I go to the source. I go to chat.openai.com, set up an account, and then you can just ask ChatGPT anything you want. Same goes for Microsoft. They have their own set of AI. It's connected with their browser Bing, or their search service Bing, and you can use that there. And so you don't even need a piece of software. You can just log into it over a browser and it'll work. Go ahead.
Hi, I was just having a conversation last night with some people in the medical profession, and they were saying how long it's taking for MRIs and CAT scans to be read because of the lack of radiologists.
Yeah, I heard that.
So do you have any idea when the AI is going to be able to read imagery? Because they were saying that people aren't going into radiology anymore since the information came out that sometime in the future, AI was going to be able to read those images.
Well, I honestly, I don't know when it's going to be good enough. I know it works now. And people use it doctors will use it to assist them. And in a sense, make a first draft, as we said, analyze my cancer, look for the tumor. That thing's a tumor right there. And then the doc has to verify it. So it is in use now. Go ahead, Gary.
I'm aware of at least one study that was done that showed that pretty conclusively that AI can do a more accurate job of interpreting for CAT scans and MRIs. The problem is, I mean, the medical profession is designed partly to maintain the incomes of the medical profession. Enough said.
My question is, when you give your homework assignments to verify the answers, where do your students go to verify those answers? If this is supposedly the...
Can ChatGPT verify itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm hoping that they present well, let me just say this. At some point, I, as a professor, am responsible for designing into a course a way for students to hang themselves. And so, and it's something that will come out and give them and show me what they can do. So, for example, now my testing, I don't test that. There are no take-home tests anymore. They're all on paper. They're all in the room. And that tells me, and there are no computers. I used to 30-second story. I used to be a pre-med major at Calvin. And I took organic chemistry and flunked. And I said, nerds to this, I can do better than this. And I was raised better than this. And I took it again. And I can do this, and I flunked it again, flat out. And I mean, my Ron Blankenspore, my Calvin chemistry professor, wrote me a recommendation for graduate school. I worked so hard. But the point is, there are just some things that you know, you can capture in a test, in a piece of performance like that you have to be able to do. And I am responsible for designing that. If I give a student enough to learn in my class and they choose to ignore it, okay, if I'm going to give a homework assignment and I want you to do it, I don't want you to cheat, but they cheat anyway. Okay, I can't do much about that. There's not much I can do to, I mean, students are going to cheat. Yeah, it's up to me to be able to design something they cannot cheat on. So I used to design, the reason I told my story is that I couldn't memorize all of the chemical syntheses. And so up until this past semester, students used a computer. I said, you don't have to memorize stuff. It's open book, open note. And I caught students open ChatGPTing. And so therefore it's not open note anymore. It's closed note. Again, they can take a cheat sheet with them. Lots of on paper, testing in class. So it's up to me to design something that shows a student's true ability. The rest of it, if they don't want to learn in class, they just want to turn in something, I can't do much about that anymore.
We have come to 2:30, sadly, because I think we could have a delightful conversation for another
Oh,
hour.
good. This is fun.
Please join me in thanking Mike for a very stimulating conversation.
Thanks, folks. This was a great time. I'll hang around for a little bit if you want to come and chat for just a second. I do have advisors at 3 o'clock, so I got to, at least walk back to my office by 3.